Welcome to 5 Ways to Support Letter Sound Learning. This is for you if you are a preschool teacher, a kindergarten teacher, maybe you're a first grade teacher with students who still need to work on their letter sounds, or maybe you're a reading interventionist or a tutor, or maybe you're a mom who is gearing up to send your kiddo to kindergarten and you just want to give them that extra boost that they need when it comes to letter sounds. So just to get us started, I just want to share a little bit of background with you. So what really sparked my interest in learning more about letter sounds and learning more about how to help students retain letter sounds started the year that I was asked to teach kindergarten. So I am a literacy coach, K-5, and when the pandemic hit, we were asked to go back into the classroom, either virtually or in person. So I jumped on the opportunity to go back into the classroom, and I loved every minute. I call it my sabbatical. But what I found was that when I was in the classroom, it's very different to be in the classroom with kiddos that are yours. I call them my little ducklings. And it's very different to have your group of students than it is to go in, work with adults, model lessons, be in classrooms for short stints of time. And so this was really, really such a good experience for me. And it's really what helped me realize that the curriculum that we were currently using in our district was just not working. And it's what helped me dive a little bit deeper and try to figure out and problem solve how we could best support our students. So if you don't know me, I am Amy Burkholder. I'm the owner here at Literacy Adventures, and this is my family. My husband works in the same school district that I do, and my kiddos are so important to me, and they keep us busy with sports and all the things. So all right, so our objectives for our session today is to understand the background and research to teaching letter sounds. We're going to look at some considerations when it comes to either using a scope and sequence, creating a scope and sequence, or maybe you're trying to find a scope and sequence. We're going to talk about sound articulation, we're going to talk about letter formation, and we're going to talk about instruction and lesson planning. So our driving question to get us started is, what does the research say about teaching letters and sounds? And one quote that I pulled that I think is really important for us to start with is from the NRP, the National Reading Panel report in 2000. And it says that one of the best predictors of reading achievement from early kindergarten to second grade is letter name knowledge. And we need to remember that. We need to remember that the two most important foundational skills that we can give our students early on is letter name and sound knowledge and phonemic awareness, because that is how they will be able to put the two together and become successful readers. So the question I always get is, well, where do we start? Some curriculums tell us to teach letters first. Some curriculums tell us to teach the sounds. Some put a big emphasis on letter formation or articulation. And so it can be really confusing as teachers to know exactly what and when and how to teach. So the important thing to know is that the alphabetic principle is this concept that the letters that are represented on a page, those letters map onto sounds in the spoken word. And that's what we want our students to understand. We want them to have the alphabetic principle. And so the way that we can get them there and get them to have this understanding is through explicit, systematic, sequential, and consistent instruction. And so I'm going to share some ways with you today that you can make that instruction all of those things. So one question that we ask when we think about the research is, do we teach letter names first, or do we teach letter sounds? Which do we do? So I pulled some research articles and we're going to look at those. But what I want us to consider first is the traditional letter of the week really supported by research? And the answer is no. When we really look at teaching one letter per week, in our school district, we have 9-week semesters. So if we teach one letter per week, then we are at 26 weeks, which is about a little over halfway through our school year. And we want kids reading words way faster than that. So we really need to reconsider doing one letter a week. So this study suggested that they said, one letter a week is way too slow pace for kindergartners. And so this study found that kindergartners who were taught one letter per day, followed by periods of that cumulative review, made better progress than those who were taught with one letter a week. So another question is, do the pictures we use to represent sounds really matter? And the answer to that is yes. We want to be intentional with our keywords that we use to represent our sounds. And so we're going to look at a few today. I want you to look at these two images, and I am trying to represent the sound that G makes. So the hard G sound. Which one of these would you use as a picture representation for that sound? I would use goat, and I would choose goat because if I chose grapes, I want you to say grapes, and then I want you to say goat. Which is the purest of the two sounds? Is it goat or is it grapes? It's goat. Grapes has that blend, which can make it hard for students to isolate that beginning sound. Another popular one, you see these on alphabet strips all the time, is X. Yes, we see xylophone. Yes, we see X-ray, but what do our kindergarten kids see in the words that they're reading? What they see often is X at the end of a word. So we need to represent it that way for our students. So I love using the word box because they hear that X sound at the end. And so that would be the best choice for this one. And another popular one is the letter E. We often see elephant. I want you guys to consider another word. I love edge. So let's say edge. You have that pure sound of E. When you say elephant, you hear the L sound, and that is not the sound that E makes. So just keep that in mind as you're picking pictures for representing those sounds. Another question that we often get is, why don't we start with sounds? Shouldn't we leave letter names out of the mix? Well, remember back to that quote, the National Reading Panel said that letter names was one of the biggest predictors for future reading success. So we can't leave those out. So in this study, they found that students who learned letter names and sounds together had better sound knowledge than those that were initially taught with just the letter sounds. Anna Geiger, in her new book, I pulled this quote from her new book, and she says a letter's name is the anchor to which children can attach other information. And so what she means by that is letters can represent many different sounds. We have 44 phonemes in our English language, and we have 26 letters. So the only constant for our students are the letter names for those sounds. Those are the labels. That's how they can attach those sounds. They can look at the letter A, know it's the letter A, and then it can make the A sound or it can make the A sound, but the letter name itself never changes. So it creates an anchor for our students. So now we're going to look at a scope and sequence, and we're going to, whether you have a scope and sequence or you're trying to create one, or you are trying to decide between one or another, I'm going to give you some things that you should really consider, because when we're teaching letter sounds, we have to have a roadmap. Just like with our phonics instruction, we have to have a scope and sequence. That's where we have to start. So we're going to look at some things to consider with that. So the first thing you want to consider if you're looking at a scope and sequence is you want your scope and sequence to have high utility word or letters up front in their scope and sequence. And what that means is those high utility letters are letters that students are going to see frequently in the words they are reading. And so here are some high frequency letter sounds that you should look to see in the front part of your scope and sequence. You should also look at and make sure that they are including those vowels. Like I was talking about earlier with our curriculum that we used to use, we didn't teach short vowels until after we taught all the consonants, which really just doesn't make any sense, right? We want to teach vowels very early, and we want to do it frequently. You want to also consider continuous versus stop sounds. So there's some research to support that once students are able to blend and segment orally, and they have a handful of letters, Louisa Moat says 10 to 12 letter sounds is usually like the sweet spot there, they can begin reading words. So we don't have to wait until we go all the way through all 26 letters to teach our students to begin reading words. But there's some research to support that kids who are just starting to learn how to put the sound and symbol together, continuous sounds are really helpful for them. So when you're looking at your scope and sequence, you want to make sure you have some continuous sounds mixed in with some stop sounds in your in your scope and sequence. So continuous sounds, I tell my students, are sounds that could go on until you run out of breath, like and s and v, right? And so also your vowel sounds are continuous sounds. Stop sounds are sounds that pop and stop, like b, t, k. Those are your pop sounds. So now I'd like for you to try it. Let's think about the letter Z. The sound Z, is it a continuous or a stop sound? It's continuous. How about the letter D? D. It's a stop sound. How about the letter P? P. Stop sound. How about the letter T? T. Stop sound. And how about the letter F? It is a continuous sound. So something else that we have to consider is whether it is voiced or unvoiced. So we tell our students in kindergarten, it's either motor on or motor off. So if your motor is on, there's a vibration right here in your vocal cords. And if it is unvoiced, you don't feel that vibration. So what happens is sometimes when you're looking at that letter sounds, some letter sounds have the same point of articulation, but one is voiced and one is unvoiced. And so when we're looking at that scope and sequence, we wouldn't want to pair those two together. So for example, I want you to hold onto your vocal cords and say D. That is voiced. Now I want you to say it. I want you to hold onto your vocal cords and say T. That is unvoiced. I want you to do it again, and I want you to hold for D, and I want you to hold for T. And I want you to pay attention to the point of articulation of these two sounds. It's very similar, right? Just one is voiced and one is unvoiced. So when kids start reading CVC words for the first time, what happens is they will segment the word beautifully, d, I, p, and then they will say something like tip, right? And it's because that point of articulation is very similar for students. Just one is voiced and one is unvoiced. And so separating these out in your scope and sequence when you're teaching letter sounds will be beneficial to your students as well. So there are a couple others. B and P are similar, and G and K are similar. So you want to kind of separate those out in your scope and sequence. So let's talk about a little bit more about the research. Let's talk about whether or not we should draw attention to articulation. And the answer to that is yes. We want our students to understand how to articulate the sounds correctly. Oftentimes when they come to us from preschool or they come to us from home, something that happens is they add that schwa at the end of their sound. So instead of B being a pop sound or a stop sound, B becomes right? So if we're drawing their attention to that articulation piece, we can clear up some of those issues, but we can also ensure that they are forming that letter correctly. So a study of 96 students took 3 groups. There were 3 different kinds of groups. And what they found was that the group with the articulation picture, which meant that there was a picture showing them how to form their mouths, did the best. They did better than the other 2 control groups. So we want to make sure that we are pulling all of these methods together, and we want to make sure that when we are working with our students that we are focusing on the end goal, and that is reading and spelling, right? And so we want to make sure that that we're using research-backed resources, that we're using research-backed activities, and that we're following that research when we are teaching our students so that they can begin to read and spell words, because that's our end goal in kindergarten, right? For them to be able to read and spell. Another question that we often get is, what about letter formation? Do we teach it? Do we not teach it? So here's what we know about letter formation based on research. We know that automaticity in handwriting is crucial for efficient use of working memory. So we know that teaching letter formation, that's a foundational skill. We do it, we should do it anyway, right? We should make sure that they become fluent in how they are printing their letters. Proper letter formation is crucial for developing that motor memory. And we know that there are research studies that say writing letter sounds reinforces the understanding of that relationship between the letters and sounds in our written language. And so we know that when they are working and they're learning sounds, if we teach that letter formation alongside that, it's actually going to benefit our students. So we've covered the research. Now I just want to share with you 5 ways to implement this research into your classroom. So here are your 5. I'm going to give you the 5 and then we're going to go through them. Number 1, teach like a hare, not a tortoise. Number 2, explicit instruction. Number 3, incorporate phonemic awareness. Number 4, practice letter formation every single day. And number 5, create a home to school connection. So when I say teach like a hare and not a tortoise, I mean no more letter of the week. Consider your scope and sequence and teach 3 to 4. If you're teaching vowels, you'll teach 5 letters a week and build in that cumulative review. So it might look something like this. If I'm teaching 3 letters a week, B, M, and A, then I am going to add in new letters the next week with some review skills. So you can see how this kind of builds, how we spend 2 weeks on each vowel. And that's because kids struggle a little bit with vowel sounds. And so we want to make sure that they are solid and that they are very fluent with those vowels. And so we also use this vowel intensive sheet every single day. From the beginning of kindergarten, we do a fun little chant, and we just want them to be super fluent with those vowels. But you can see, introducing 3, you can see how about week 6, we're still introducing, but we're also building in that cumulative review. So we're still practicing those letter sounds. Number 2, explicit instruction is key, right? And so we want to make sure that we are following a solid lesson plan. And not only that we're following a lesson plan, but it is consistent from letter to letter. When we're introducing letters, there is a process to how we do that. I have given my teachers these lesson plans, and what I say to them is, I don't want you to follow this lesson plan to a T. I don't want to walk in and see you reading from a script. What I want you to do is I want you to use this lesson plan as your guide. When we start our lesson, we do a warm up. We might sing the alphabet song, having them point to each letter. We might do some phoneme blending or segmenting. We might do a vowel intensive or a visual drill or an auditory drill, right? Then we move into that explicit teaching piece where we're introducing that new letter sound. We identify the letter, we identify the shape, we identify the sound, the articulation, and we help with that letter formation piece. And then we provide them lots and lots of ways to apply that knowledge and continue building that knowledge. And we do that through giving them lots of practice, giving them extension activities, and building in that review piece. So here is an example of what a warm-up might look like in our lesson plan. So we might do a visual drill. I'll click through, I'll flash my cards through for them, and they will tell me the sound. So b, a, r, s. And I might also say to them, what makes the sound? And they might then use, these are from the Dollar Tree. I love these. And they would just write the letter M here and they would say, M says, I might ask them to tell me what sound makes the ah sound. A says ah. What sound makes the ah sound? O says ah. So we're reviewing. That's what that review looks like. Also, with phonemic awareness, we keep it very simple. We focus on the larger units of phonological awareness in our whole group time, which you guys will have access to those whole group slides. But we focus on the smaller units of phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, blending and segmenting in small group, because we know research tells us that blending and segmenting supports reading and spelling. So that's where we want to focus in small group. So we keep it simple. We use Alconen boxes. We do like using colored chips because kindergarten kiddos are still learning to read from left to right. So we want to give them that visual. So we like to use green, yellow, and red. So green means go. Yellow means slow down because we are working on those vowel sounds. And red means stops. That's where we're going to stop. So we'll give them a word, map, map, and they'll practice segmenting and blending that back together. Now it's time to move into the explicit teaching piece. And this is where I'm talking about use that guide so that you're able to talk about the articulation with your students. So when I'm introducing the letter T, it might sound something like this. When I make the T sound, I place my the tip of my tongue on the roof of my mouth, just behind my front teeth. I might talk about how my tongue touches the sides of my teeth and it feels quiet. That must mean it's voiceless. I don't have my motor on for that. And then I'll say, can you give it a try? Can you make the t sound? And then I might say, oh, it pops right out and stops. Remember, pops and stops. T, t, right? So I'll show them that. And then I might pull out an articulation. Remember that study we talked about having that visual was really helpful for students. So I might pull out a visual for what your lips are supposed to look like. I have a mirror around here somewhere, I think. And then I might pull out the mirror, a pocket mirror for them to look at and have them practice making that sound. And then I might say, okay, this is the letter T. This is the uppercase T, and this is the lowercase t. So I'm teaching the articulation, teaching the shape of the letter, I'm teaching the sound, I'm pulling it all together, I'm giving them a picture representation. T as in toast, turkey, 10. And this is where we want to, when they're practicing making that sound, we want to make sure that we are giving that immediate feedback. T says t. T does not say t, right? So immediately fix that if you hear it as you are practicing. And then I might just write like on a whiteboard the letter T and maybe some other letters. And I'll just kind of go around and I'll say, okay, Sarah, can you find a letter T, point to it and say it sound? So just practicing that with them. Then comes the letter formation piece. So we're going to practice writing the letter T. The letter T is start at the dotted line, straight stick down, cross in the middle. Start at the dotted line, straight stick down, cross in the middle. So we're going to practice it in the air. We might practice it on our desks. We might use sand or these little Etch-a-Sketches from the Dollar Tree. But ultimately what we want to do is put pencil to paper. So we want them to practice. So we start with our letter formation booklets, which you guys all have access to, and you're going to pull straight down. So start at the top, straight line down, cross in the middle, and have them practice that right in front of you and correct anything that needs to be corrected while they're at that small group table with you. But we know we can't just teach that letter one time and then forget about it, right? We have to continuously be incorporating that into our instruction. So Louisa Moats tells us 10 to 15 minutes a day for kindergarten and first grade students need to have that explicit letter formation and handwriting practice. So we've practiced that. We want to make sure we're incorporating the phonemic awareness. So we can begin with known sounds, having our students begin to read and write words. So this is what it might look like. If I have the word, let's see, the word is bat, for example. So these are the letters that they've learned. And now I'm going to have them segment out the sounds to spell the word bat. So they're going to push up, b, a, t. And then I'm going to say, what sound do you hear at the beginning of b, at? So there's your phoneme isolation piece. And they're going to say, b. I'm going to say, that is great. We've learned that letter, haven't we? So we're going to pull this chip down. And what they're going to do is they're going to replace the letter B, or they're going to replace the chip with the letter B. And then they're going to read it. So it's going to say, b, at. And I'm going to say, what is that vowel sound we hear in the word b? At. What vowel sound do we hear? Oh, that's right. We hear the letter A. So they'll pull this chip down and they're going to replace it with the letter form. So now on their Elkonin boxes, they have the letter B, the letter A, and they've pushed up their red chip here for the letter T. And I'm going to say, okay, let's read it. B, at. What is that last sound you just touched? What letter is that? That's the letter T. Great job. Let's pull this down. And let's replace it with the letter T. Now we're going to read bat. What's the word? Bat. And so just by having these handful of letters here, which are all in the beginning of my scope and sequence, these are all of the words that they should be able to read and spell, and you can help support and scaffold that for them. So the last tip was one of the last tips was for letter formation. So we want to make sure like I said, that we are practicing that letter formation beyond what we're doing in small group. They're having lots and lots of time to practice. So what we do in kindergarten and first grade is we set aside 10 minutes for letter formation practice. And what my teachers do is they'll say, okay, Monday we're doing all tall stick letters. So we're doing L, we're doing T, we're doing B. We're focusing on all those tall stick letters. And they might just get out a piece of handwriting paper and say, okay, L is start at the top line, straight stick down. Okay, let's do 5. Now let's do the letter T. T is start at the top line, straight stick down, cross in the middle. Now let's do 5. Another fun thing that we do is we just created this alphabet quest that goes along with the whole group slides, and we just practice. So this is the practice part here where we're doing this together. I'll get out my document camera and we will practice. Start at the dotted line, circle back, up and down. Everybody do it. Circle back, up and down. And we do that a couple times. And then I set the timer for a minute and I say, ready, set, go. Now here's the key. I let them write as many of the letter A or whatever the letter is as they can before the minute goes off, before the timer goes off for the minute. But they only get a point for ones that are neat. So if they try to get to the end and they don't have neat letter A's, they're not going to get many points, right? So I encourage them to take their time so they get those points. And then we just created a little fun check card here where if they get the letter A and it's all super neat, they get a little check. And it just kind of helps them set goals for themselves and kind of hold them accountable for working on that letter formation. And then tip number 5 is include parents. So parents in kindergarten, that's when you have to get them. They're excited, right? They don't really know any better. They're just excited. They are excited that their kids are in kindergarten and they want to be helpful. They want to know what is happening at school. And so what we do is we just create a little newsletter. This kind of just gives them brief information in parent-friendly terms of what it looks like. Like, this is what we're doing. This is what our instruction looks like at school. You can see I added in here that B says B, not B, just giving them those tips. We give them the language focus for the week. We can give them tips for things that they can play to practice that language focus. And then we give them that letter focus. So these are the ones that we're working on. These are some images that your kids might see at school. So after they've gotten this and we've done this for the week, then the next week we send home some practice. We just stick it in a little sheet protector. We stick it in the folder. And every single day we say to parents, hey, you've got your expo marker. You've got this sheet. What you want them to do is you want them to read the sounds, r, s, ah, s, read through those and then practice that letter formation. It takes about 10 minutes a day and parents love being involved. Okay, so that was fast and furious, but let's recap. So I want you to fill in the blank for me. Teach like a hare, not a tortoise. So we are going to teach 3 to 4, maybe 5, depending on your kiddos, letter sounds a week. And we are going to do away with letter of the week. We're going to build in that cumulative review and we're going to teach those letter sounds. Explicit instruction is key. So we have to make sure that we have a lesson plan. We understand that we're covering the shape, the articulation, the letter formation. We're giving them lots of time to practice. We're doing the warm-up, the phonemic awareness warm-ups. We're building in that cumulative review, and we're explicitly teaching those letter sounds to our students. Incorporate phonemic awareness. So we want to make sure that we're incorporating it on the front end of our lesson, building that oral phonemic awareness. But when kids are ready, we want to pull those Okonan boxes back out and we want to start helping them to segment and write some of those words. Practice blank every day. Practice letter formation every single day. I promise you will not be disappointed if you take 10 minutes a day to practice that letter formation with your kids. And create a blank and blank connection. We want to create a home to school connection. We want parents to be involved. We want them to understand what we're teaching their kiddos. Okay, so advice from one teacher to another, make it fun, make it engaging. Teach the letters. Don't be afraid to teach them. Make sure that they understand them. Build in that cumulative review. Be consistent. However you introduce the letter A, you're going to introduce all the other letters that way. You want to find a scope and sequence. You're either going to create one. I have a free one for you included with this webinar, or if you already have one, regardless, you want to stick to whatever that scope and sequence is. And engage your students, have fun, bring in the manipulatives, let them have fun. Reading should be fun, especially when they're just starting out. You want them to love the activities that they're doing. You just want to make sure that they are based on research and that you're getting the most bang for your buck out of those resources. But it's totally okay to bring in all the fun manipulatives while you're doing it. Okay, and that's the end. So I am going to drop a link so that you guys have access to this recording so that you are able to get all the goodies, have everything at your fingertips that you need for teaching letter sounds. And if you want to connect with me, I do school and district literacy consulting. My curriculum is approved in the state of Virginia under the Virginia Literacy Act, and I'm working to get it approved in other states as well. So that means that you can count on it being science-based research curriculum because it has to be vetted in the state under these literacy acts to ensure that we're giving students the best that we can be giving them. I have a monthly membership, Route to Reading, where we do webinars like this all the time. And you also get access to any and all of the resources that I've ever created inside that membership hub. I have a podcast called Route to Reading, and I do free webinars like this at least once a month. And I give tons and tons of free resources. So you can find all of those things on my website at literacyadventures.com. And I hope to see you soon. I hope to see you at the next webinar, and I will see you then.